Good evening. You're watching London Live News at 6 with Tanya Francis. Coming up tonight, social media played a part in the death of Molly Russell. The findings in the inquest into the 14-year-old taking her own life, as the coroner is set to send his conclusions to the government and social media giants. Sadiq Khan says the Prime Minister is acting like all of this is a game. We'll have more reaction from the Mayor following the fallout from the mini-budget and the slump in the pound. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, the capital is gearing up to host a series of NFL games. We'll hear about the matches coming to the Tottenham Hotspur's stadium soon. And the late Queen is being remembered in a series of artworks. We'll hear from one of the artists who has commemorated her in a glittering painting. Well, all of that on the way, but first to our top story this evening. The inquest into the death of Molly Russell has found that unsafe online content contributed in more than a minimal way to the 14-year-old taking her own life. The senior coroner at North London's Coroner's Court ruled that Molly had died from an act of self-harm while suffering from depression and the negative effects of online content, and said the material viewed by the teenager on social media should not have been available for a child to see. Well, Molly, who was from northwest London, viewed thousands of self-harm and suicide images online before she died in November 2017. In a statement after the coroner's conclusion, NSPCC Chief Executive Sir Peter Walness said this should send shockwaves through Silicon Valley. Well, the senior coroner will now put together a report with his concerns, which is he will then share with Meta, who own Instagram, Pinterest and the government and Ofcom. Well, Molly Russell's father was outside the courts earlier today.
We've heard much about one tragic story, Molly's story. Sadly, there are too many others similarly affected right now. At this point, I just want to say, however dark it seems, there is always hope. And if you're struggling, please speak to someone you trust or one of the many wonderful support organisations rather than engage with content online that may be harmful. Please do what you can to live long and stay strong.
There we have it, Molly Russell's father there with the latest since the conclusions of that inquest. Now, Sadiq Khan has said today he believes that the government's policies are exacerbating inflation as energy prices are set to rise for millions of households from tomorrow, with the average annual bill to go up to around £2,500. Well, the Prime Minister is facing increased pressure to publish an independent verdict of their tax cuttings plans. But Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, who met with the government's financial forecaster today, have said that the economic forecast will not be brought forward and released early. The next forecast is due to be published on the 23rd of November, when Kwarteng will lay out his medium-term plans and explain how the borrowing and tax cuts announced last week will be paid for in the future. Well, Sadiq Khan, who was in Bermondsey earlier, gave his view on how the Prime Minister is dealing with the current economic crisis.
I think Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng think this is all a game. And what they need to realise is there are consequences from the decisions you make as the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. We've already had a really tough 2-3 years with the pandemic, with the cost of living crisis, and the government's policies are exacerbating inflation, exacerbating the cost of living crisis, exacerbating concerns around interest rates and energy prices. And I've met many people since Friday, businesses, but also families, who are really worried about this autumn and this winter. Tomorrow, energy prices are going to go up again, but also we're seeing those who are owner-occupiers, lucky enough to have a mortgage, really worried now about interest rates going up with a variable mortgage, with a tracker mortgage, but also with their fixed-term mortgage coming to an end over the next year.
That was Mayor of London Sadiq Khan there. Some other stories from across London now. The family of a boy who was thrown from the balcony of the Tate have said that he is making progress in his recovery and is showing clear improvement in his sight. Well, the boy, who was 6 at the time, was badly hurt when he was attacked by Jonty Bravery in August 2019 and thrown off a balcony in the Tate, falling over 100 foot. Well, Bravery, who has autism, was convicted of attempted murder and was jailed for 15 years. New research by the Evening Standard shows that only 547 nurses joined the NHS in the capital in the year up to June, despite the health service dealing with a record backlog in hospital treatments and a growing pressure on accident and emergency. Well, figures from NHS Digital show that the number of nurses leaving the NHS in London has increased by more than 24% in a year, with the highest number aged between 30 and 34. Well, NHS officials have said a number of trusts have been providing support to staff through food banks for those in the lower pay bands struggling to uphold their career with the cost of living crisis. Now, the average man living in Lambeth will not live to 80. This is according to new figures, which shows the average life expectancy for men and women in the borough has dropped to its lowest level in a decade. The figures published by Lambeth Council show men will live up to 77 instead of the prediction of 80 from 2019, and women will live to 83 instead of 85. Well, further research into the reasons behind this suggests that it could be due to the borough having the lowest rate of antibiotic prescriptions and the highest rate of sexually transmitted infections in the capital. Well, Councillor for Lambeth is calling for blood pressure and diabetes checks to be made more readily available at food banks and hubs to help address the borough's health issues. Now, if we look at strike action across the capital and how that might affect you over the coming days, Royal Mail workers in London began a 48-hour strike as part of a worsening dispute over pay across the country. Picket lines have been mounted outside delivery and sorting offices after no progress was made in talks yesterday, with a further 19 days of strikes planned throughout October and November. Well, the Communication Workers Union are urging Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg to meet the workers in person to help resolve this ongoing issue. Sticking with the strikes, planned strike action by bus drivers across the capital on the 4th of October has been called off after a pay dispute was resolved. So members of Unite received an 11% pay increase, according to the union, which has stopped around 2,000 bus drivers in North London from walking out. The Unite General Secretary has called the increase a very strong result, saying that it establishes what can be achieved when union members stand together in unity. Well, the planned rail strikes in the capital are still going to go ahead from this weekend, though, with members of 4 trade unions set to bring rail services to a standstill on Saturday. That's the 1st of October. Now, around 40,000 runners will be making their way to the start line for the London Marathon on Saturday from all around the country, with 90% of rail services, as just mentioned, they're out of action due to the strikes by RMT, ASLIF, TSSA unions. Well, James has been looking into this and has an update on what we can expect this weekend.
Many participants are disgruntled.
For a runner, routine is everything. And to have this kind of uncertainty hanging over you on probably the biggest day of your running career, and especially to think of all the friends and family that are not going to be able to see their loved ones running the marathon.
Registering for the event at the Excel Centre may be a bit tricky on Saturday morning, according to the marathon organisers, so leave plenty of time. All rail routes in the capital will be affected, including the Elizabeth line. Don't bank on catching one of the 10% of trains running, though, as services are also due to start later than usual in the morning too. It will be the first time the unions have walked out on the same day, so all services will be more significantly disrupted than on any previous strike day. However, buses, the Tube and the DLR will all be running. Expect them to be busy, though. Some runners say they have deferred to April next year because they couldn't face the trek to the capital. Well, the race director Hugh Brasher said marathon organisers had been working with Network Rail to ensure runners could start the race on time.
There we go, the latest as we are set to see thousands of runners through the capital, and some advice on those strikes, which we will be seeing across the network on Saturday. On to some sport now, and it's an exciting weekend in the Premier League with a North London derby kick-starting the action tomorrow. Arsenal hosts rivals Tottenham in the early kick-off at the Emirates, with the Gunners sitting top of the league, just a point above Spurs. Tottenham manager Antonio Conte believes new signings have boosted Arsenal this season and have a talented young coach in Mikel Arteta.
The summer they made good sign for them and improved the team that, don't forget, last season In the last 3 games, they were 4 points up than us. Arteta, I said last season that for me is a really good coach. He's young, but he can have in front of him a great career. Yeah, we know that Arsenal is one of the 6 teams that try to take the best position in Premier League.
Well, there you have it. That North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham kicks off tomorrow at 12:30 at lunchtime. Now let's give you an insight into what the weather will be doing this weekend, especially for any of those runners that will be pounding the pavements. We might see some outbreaks of rain tonight with temperatures around 14 degrees, but that will clear by the morning with a mix of sunshine and cloud, maybe a spot of rain. The rest of Saturday looks bright and settled, but by Sunday, the odd spot of rain will be back with average temperatures around 18 degrees. Now, just before the break, let's bring you this. Let's take a look at these pictures. Here is what a new version of a 50p coin with the King's image, King Charles, will look like. The Royal Mint expects that the new coins will enter circulation and we could see them in our pockets and purses from around December. The King's portrait will first appear on a special £5 crown. And the Mint will release a memorial coin range on Monday to commemorate the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. So something to look out for. We are taking a break, but up next, we'll have the latest from the week in politics, and we'll find out more about how the capital is gearing up to host a number of NFL games as the sport comes to North London next month.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather. And know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather. And know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather.
and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello and welcome back to the show. A look now at the latest from the last week in Westminster. Political reporter John Johnson from Politics Home took me through the fallout from the mini-budget announcement last week and how the government reacted to the slump in the pound.
It's kind of all been based on the fact that the market seemed to have panicked massively in response to what the Chancellor announced. Obviously, we had this massive intervention in the energy markets, which is, a very expensive intervention. And then the Chancellor came out and announced on top of that kind of really sweeping range of tax cuts, which obviously reduces the amount of money coming in to the Treasury. So all of those things combined culminated in this really quite extraordinary run on the pound, and then also other kind of measures of financial markets also went downhill for the UK as well. So it's been a really tough week. And a lot of MPs, Tory MPs as well, really panicked by this and worried what this means for the future.
Yes, sort of the next instalment in the sort of crisis, the cost of living crisis that I think in many ways has come sort of unexpectedly, and potentially also for Liz Truss, because she's been noticeably quiet after Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget announcement. Then we hear her being sort of grilled up and down the country on various different radio stations. It appears she struggled to answer some of these questions. Do we think her sort of 4 days of silence was perhaps tactical?
I mean, I think there was a real concern that if she came out and spoke too early, that it would cause even more concern in the markets, which is really not a good position for a brand new Prime Minister to be in. The kind of every word that you utter causes the pound to drop slightly. But that, that's where they ended up. But it was getting to a point where they kind of had to come out and say something. I think partly there is often this kind of unspoken agreement between parties that they won't make any big speeches or any big announcements while the party conferences are going on. They kind of let each other have that time. So that was maybe partially part of the reason. But I think, Tory MPs were saying we have to hear from the Prime Minister, we have to hear from the Chancellor. They've got to come out and say something because the reaction in the markets has been extraordinary.
Well, on that, the Bank of England announced that it would buy government bonds on a temporary basis to help kind of restore this worry and bring sort of market conditions back to a level playing field, which it looks like it kind of has for the moment. It's still volatile, but the pound is back up to pre-mini-budget levels. The response on whether this was the right thing to do has been quite divided, John.
Yeah, I mean, there has been criticism of the Bank of England for stepping in, certainly initially. But what we kind of found out subsequently was that there were pension funds that were in real danger from kind of some of the bonds, as you mentioned. They were dropping in price. And it seemed that some of the pension funds were very reliant on that. So the Bank of England kind of had to step in to try and keep them from collapsing. But, I think quite a lot also with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, making comments about the UK, which were not massively welcomed by certainly the government. We've seen in the last couple of days the government trying to say that this is not really linked to their mini budget, that this is kind of part of wider global conditions. But one of the senior economists at the Bank of England has said, yes, there is a kind of global pressure on financial markets and on currencies, but that there is a specific UK element that can't be ignored. So, the government probably quite happy that the markets have slightly stabilised, but, that's only because the Bank of England have stepped in with quite an extraordinary measure to do so. And even though the pound has recovered some of these other things, gilts, the price at which government can borrow money for some of their packages, that hasn't improved at all. That's still in a pretty bad situation. So there's still sort of a lot of deep concern. about what's happening to the UK economy and what role the government have played in that.
And one of the things which I want to talk to you about, John, is because it's coming in sort of today and tomorrow, is the price fuel cap, something that many may see as something which could alleviate their financial situation. But what we have learnt perhaps from these interviews with Liz Truss over the last couple of days is that £2,500 cap or limit is rather an indication of what a typical household will pay rather than a hard limit. Perhaps this wasn't as clearly communicated first time round as people had hoped. Do you think that this could perhaps add to people not having as much faith in Liz Truss's policies?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're absolutely right. The way this is communicated was that £2,500 was like a hard stop, that you could use as much energy as you wanted and £2,500 be as much as you would ever pay, which is just not correct. That is sort of what they expect that the cap could reach for an average household with average usage. This is not a kind of absolute maximum that people will end up paying. And I think, as you said, that was something that was only really teased out after these local interviews yesterday. So we're going into the Conservative Party conference this weekend and into early next week. It's going to be fascinating to see what the response is from members, the business community that are often a big presence at these conferences, and the MPs who decide to show up. I mean, a lot of MPs are not going, I think, because they don't want to have to defend what the government have done in the last couple of weeks, because fundamentally they don't really agree with it and they want the government to change tack.
Well, that was John Johnston there with a reaction from the last week in Westminster. Now, hot dogs, Mount Rushmore and the trusty pickup truck. I mean, it doesn't really get more American than that, does it? Well, this October, the capital is getting its annual sporting fix from our friends across the pond, as London plays host to 3 NFL games. That's right, some of the biggest names in American football are coming to North London, starting with the Minnesota Vikings and the New Orleans Saints at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this Sunday. Well, NFL reporter Neil Reynolds has been involved in the London games since the first in 2007 and has been speaking to Henry about the massive growth of the sport in this country.
Every year it just gets bigger and bigger, and you see new fans, you see more fans wearing shirts, you see just in everyday life you meet more fans as you walk around the streets of London. So yeah, playing the games here since 2007, 15 years now we've been playing regular season games here. We've got 3 more this year in London. So, yep, 2 at Tottenham, 1 at Wembley with the Jags. It really is every way you can imagine it. Television figures, people who play the game, interest in the game. It's brilliant. I never could have imagined we'd get to this point.
Well, England is known for football, rugby, cricket, whereas American football, there's a lot going on, especially at the halftime show in the Super Bowl, for example. Why has its popularity just kept climbing over here?
The action is great. I think the fact that the NFL's had like 9 different champions in the last 10 years, you never know what's going to happen. Any Sunday is the most unpredictable of sports. And it's just a great, fast-paced, action-packed, very tactical sport. And you mentioned those other sports as well. And I think the NFL's done a great job of becoming part of the sporting calendar. People know it's the end of September, almost October. That's time for the NFL games in London. That's become a part of our sporting calendar. And that's a testament to how far we've come.
As you say, it's come a long way. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, built 4 or 5 years or so ago, was specially made to incorporate a secondary pitch for this very purpose, to have American football. It's definitely moving in that direction. Where do you think the game can go over here, abroad from America?
So I think you could potentially have a team here one day. I think that the foundation has been laid, and again, if we'd gone back 5-10 years and somebody had told me a Premier League team will build a stadium, and when they're building that stadium they will go to the NFL and ask, what do you need? I'd have thought you were crazy. So we have 2 first-class, world-class stadiums in Tottenham and Wembley hosting games this year. So I think that's now up to an owner in America to decide if they want to come here. But the table has been set. The fan base is here. The government support is here. we're definitely going to continue to have 3, 4, 5 games per year. There are teams now that have the rights to market themselves internationally. In the UK, they're going to want to play their own games like the Jacksonville Jaguars are. So, yeah, we're not going to go backwards from these 3 games per year. I think we're only going to go bigger and better.
In years gone by, there's always been questions raised with the Premier League about having a 39th season game abroad or something very similar to these London games from the NFL. As someone who's been involved with the sport of American football for so long, what are the positives but also the negatives as the fans from that team or area can't actually go to the game?
There's nothing like seeing an actual game. So everything really kick-started and catapulted to a higher level once we played regular season games in 2007. Now, the downside is you take a game away from a team in America when they come to London. So that would be the same, you take a home game away from Liverpool. I'm not sure how you're going to get on with doing that. So we're going to complete the set next weekend when the Green Bay Packers come to play at Tottenham. They're the last team to play a regular season game in London. That's because Packers home games are so valuable that they've never been given up before, but we're getting one next week.
Well, the first of those NFL games is in the capital this Sunday between the Minnesota Vikings and the New Orleans Saints, with another 2 later in October. You're watching London Live News with Tanya Francis. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, the late Queen is being celebrated in a series of artworks in the capital as she is immortalised in hologram, sculpture and glitter. We'll see you shortly.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello and welcome back to the show this evening. A reminder of our top story. The inquest into the death of Molly Russell has found that unsafe online content contributed in more than a minimal way to the 14-year-old taking her own life. Well, the senior coroner at North London's Coroner's Court ruled that Molly had died from an act of self-harm while suffering from depression and the negative effects of online content, and has said that the material viewed by the teenager on social media should not have been available for a child to see. Well, Molly, who was from northwest London, viewed thousands of self-harm and suicide images online before she died in November 2017. In a statement after the coroner's conclusion, NSPCC Chief Executive Sir Peter Wanless said that this should send shockwaves through Silicon Valley. Well, the senior coroner will now put together a report with his concerns, which he will then share with Meta, who owns Instagram, Pinterest, and the government and Ofcom. Well, Molly's father spoke after the inquest hearing.
We've heard much about one tragic story, Molly's story. Sadly, there are too many others similarly affected right now. At this point, I just want to say, however dark it seems, there is always hope. And if you're struggling, please speak to someone you trust or one of the many wonderful support organisations rather than engage with content online that may be harmful. Please do what you can to live long and stay strong.
There we have it, Molly Russell's father there with the latest since the conclusions of that inquest. Now, Sadiq Khan has said today he believes that the government's policies are exacerbating inflation as energy prices are set to rise for millions of households from tomorrow, with the average annual bill to go up to around £2,500. Well, the Prime Minister is facing increased pressure to publish an independent verdict of their tax cuttings plans. But Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, who met with the government's financial forecaster today, have said that the economic forecast will not be brought forward and released early. The next forecast is due to be published on the 23rd of November, when Kwarteng will lay out his medium-term plans and explain how the borrowing and tax cuts announced last week will be paid for in the future. Well, Sadiq Khan, who was in Bermondsey earlier, gave his view on how the Prime Minister is dealing with the current economic crisis.
I think Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng think this is all a game. And what they need to realise is there are consequences from the decisions you make as the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. We've already had a really tough 2-3 years with the pandemic, with the cost of living crisis, and the government's policies are exacerbating inflation, exacerbating the cost of living crisis, exacerbating concerns around interest rates and energy prices. And I've met many people since Friday, businesses, but also families, who are really worried about this autumn and this winter. Tomorrow, energy prices are going to go up again, but also we're seeing those who are owner-occupiers, lucky enough to have a mortgage, really worried now about interest rates going up with a variable mortgage, with a tracker mortgage, but also with their fixed-term mortgage coming to an end over the next year.
Now, an exhibition paying tribute to Queen Elizabeth II has launched at the Qantas Gallery in Spitalfields. A Life Refracted brings together artworks from 3 of the late monarch's artists: photographer Rob Mundy, sculptor Francis Siegelman and painter Christian Furr. Well, Christian was just 28 when he became the youngest artist commissioned to paint a portrait of Her Majesty. Well, he spoke to Paul about this experience.
The portrait that I did of the Queen happened because I'd been commissioned by a Commonwealth organisation, the Royal Overseas League, which is just off St James. And the Queen had actually seen one of my paintings that was shown there in the 90s, in the early 90s, and she really liked it. So consequently, I got a call out the blue at the time, at the age of 28, and it was the director of the league, and he was asking, he actually said, "Oh, the Queen would like you to paint her portrait," and he said, "Are you sitting down?" or something like that. So it was a huge shock at the time. Kind of altered the course of my career, really. That it's an amazing phone call to get, and very honoured and thankful to the Queen herself for picking me to do that job.
How did you sort of deal with processing that information, and then how did you decide how you were going to paint her portrait?
Basically, I had carte blanche. I was quite surprised. I was asked, what would you like the Queen to wear? So I had a blank canvas to fill. And with anything that I do, I always research thoroughly. I look at lots of different things, how other artists have done things. And in this case, I looked at all the paintings that have been done of her. And they were very remote and very distant, and they were kind of very reverential. And I didn't feel like they were capturing the personality of the Queen, really. So I decided to go a bit closer. I met the dresser at the palace and went through all the different possible things that the Queen could wear. And I thought it made sense to have the Queen in the Order of the Star and Garter, which is the image that we've been seeing everywhere recently with the sad news. I liked that particular outfit because it had red, white and blue in it. I was able then to focus on the Queen as a person, and capture her sense of humour and everything else. I personally met the Duke of Edinburgh, who accepted a print of the portrait off me. I like to think that the Duke and the Queen actually liked the portrait, if that happened,
This exhibition, A Life Refracted, how did it come about? And was it a joint decision between yourself and the other 2 artists, as some of the foremost artists portraying the Queen, to come together and collaborate in the wake of this news?
Well, I've known Rob Mundy for a while. He's a brilliant holographer and artist, and it was really, the idea happened from the gallery. It was initiated by our gallery, Qantas Gallery, and we all thought it was a really good idea and a great way of celebrating the Queen in a kind of get together where we're showing not only the image that we've created, but in my case, I've created 3 new diamond dust canvases from an image that I took of the Queen during our sittings, where I made her laugh. That's part of when you're painting somebody, you need to see somebody in all the different aspects. And it was a lovely moment and a lovely memory. And I thought that's something magical about that image, and I'd like to create a new kind of new pieces from it. Great variety of work. Francis Siegelman is a sculptor, and she talked about actually measuring the Queen's face, for her sittings with calipers and taking pictures from different angles. Rob did, use cutting edge technology to create holographs, which is fascinating, so we've got all the sort of bases covered,
What impact do you hope this exhibition and your works featured in it will have on the public at this moment?
Do you know what? I think generally there's a feeling of loss, there's a feeling of gratitude, and I hope with this exhibition there's a feeling of celebration. It's celebrating somebody's life. It's realising what a brilliant example she was. Just generally, I think she did an amazing job, and and people kind of I think they realise that, and the commitment of people queuing up to visit her, a coffin for 12 hours. It's absolutely incredible. I was there at the Houses of Parliament, saw it. That doesn't happen very often. So this exhibition, I think, will be a way to celebrate her legacy. A portrait or an image or a piece of art is a way of crystallising a moment sometimes. It's a way of celebrating someone's life. So that the exhibition should hopefully do that. It's quite remarkable, and I'm really, pleased to be involved with it.
Well, there you have it. That's a life refracted, that exhibition. It's on display at the Qantas Gallery in Spitalfields until the 12th of October. Coming up next, one for the Bond fans. £6 million worth of 007 memorabilia has been auctioned off for charity, including one of the iconic cars. We'll hear from the producers of the film next.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello and welcome back to the last part of the show for this Friday. Now on to music. London-based punk band The Duel had been on a high until co-founder Andy Theorem was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2014. Well, the band originally released their album, The Soundtrack to the End of the World, in 2012. And this month, Andy's band and lead singer Tara Rez has re-released it in order to raise awareness of the disease, with proceeds from sales going to the MS Society. Well, Helena spoke with Tara earlier about the Duel's journey and their final swan song.
Say it how it is and get a slap. No one wants you around. I can't tell you where to go. Everywhere is out of control. I can't tell you what to do.
That's your song, Less Every Day, which is on the new album, and we will talk about the new album shortly. But firstly, let's just take a little look back at The Duel, because you've had such a long career, and you did your first ever show here in London almost more than 20 years ago now, was it?
Yeah, The Duel started in 2001, and initially there literally was just two of us. We were kind of making electronic punk, and we had lots of electronics going on, and Andy was doing the keyboards and I was singing and doing the guitar, and at that time people didn't quite get it though, so we kind of branched out and got a drummer and more people, and then we wrote an incredible hit song that never got to #1 through us, but it did through someone else. And that was a bit stressful. And that's when we found the punk scene. Actually, we felt like we felt secure there. We could write our songs and grow in a way where people weren't going to, nick it.
Tell us a little bit more about that story with Andy then, and what's happened, because that's, as you said, part of the reason you wanted to bring this album back and kind of breathe fresh light into it.
So me and Andy met, and within first half an hour we were writing hit songs that really got everyone very excited, and that was our drive to carry on, because we were so good at writing together. We didn't want to stop, but as time went on, he was getting more Jekyll and Hyde, and we didn't really know why. And for a lot of reasons, we were called The Duel because we kept fighting over silly things, really. And I thought he was being stubborn, and he thought I was being, whatever. But ultimately, there was definitely something wrong with him, and we just kept going to the doctors, or quite a lot of times, and often they would just say, oh, there's nothing wrong with him, it's just your relationship, it's you two. And so it kind of got sunk down, so we kind of ended up taking it out on each other, not really realising he was actually quite sick. And, ultimately, in 2008, we kind of won Best New Band Award at the British Music Awards, and that was pretty amazing. And then they went bust because the music industry was going down at that time, so there's quite a lot of uncertainty in the music world. We were getting quite popular on the internet, but ultimately behind the scenes it was quite difficult, because he looked really cool, but behind that there was things going on, and so whenever he had a cigarette or had a drink, or lived like a rock and roll style, it affected his illness and it made him worse. And I think 2014 it all kind of came to a head, really, when I saw him walking down the street and he was kind of like cramped over, and I was like, Andy, what's going on? Why are you walking like that? And he said, oh, I went to the doctors and I've got arthritis, apparently. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone with arthritis, like we're going back to that doctor and we're going to say we want a second opinion and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, because we persisted a little bit, they noticed an extra shadow that they'd never seen before. And then at that point, they diagnosed him with MS and said, oh, we've caught it quite late. and I think it's just been quite hard, really, trying to get answers, really. Andy, hopefully, will be watching this, but he is completely bedridden now. There's not much chance for him to get better, you know, because they caught it quite late.
That it must have been a very difficult time for you, and it's still a difficult thing to process. Is that part of the reason why you wanted to bring the album back? You know, maybe a chance to help people to see what life is like with MS and raise awareness?
Yeah, it's twofold, really. Me and Andy's relationship was very damaged because of it, and now we're healing our relationship because we are great writers together. And yeah, the other part is to try and make something good come out of this for other people, to kind of learn from our mistakes. And yeah, and you know, people that have sicknesses like this, the people around them, sometimes they end up getting pushed away, and it's just, or you take it out on each other, and it's just kind of making awareness for that understanding so that you can give everyone support in that situation.
There we go, Tara speaking about those fundraising efforts there with Helena. Now celebrating 60 years of James Bond, Christie's Auction House has sold over £6 million worth of memorabilia in a special 007 auction. One of the standout pieces was the Aston Martin from the film No Time to Die, which was sold for £3.2 million, with the proceeds going to over 45 different charities. Well, we heard from two of the franchise's producers about the charity sale and what 60 years of Mr. Bond means to them.
"60 years of James Bond is it's fantastic, and here we are celebrating it. And I guess none of us thought that this was possible when it first started, but it's been 60 years, and we're all here to celebrate it. We're here to celebrate it because of all the great actors and the great directors and writers and technicians, and of course Ian Fleming, without whom none of us would be here.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing for me. I mean, my career has spanned a third of that history, so, you know, a relatively small part of it in the end, but it's, for me as well, you know, getting to sort of just be reminded of all the great moments that we've had on sets throughout the years, and also, you know, seeing that there's going to be now a whole new collectors that are going to be able to own a piece of this history is just great. And of course, all benefiting a good cause. We've got over 45 different charities being represented. Each lot benefits a different charity, so it's all, the money's going to a good place. As you know, we've got a lot of long-standing relationships with certain brands, such as Aston Martin, and I think that is what in many people's minds is always going to be the Bond car, and they have been an amazing partner with us. And of course, the big signature item I think everyone's got their eye on is the gadget-laden DB5 that was in No Time to Die, which is an incredible feat of engineering and beautiful design. So I think, you know, when it comes to the character of Bond, you know, we always think about how he needs to surround himself with things that he can rely on, you know, because in an emergency, his life may depend on it, and so he's usually these sort of objects of luxury are more about the craftsmanship and quality and having something that, you know, you can rely on when you need to.
Well, every one of these props has a memory for me associated with it that I recall, and some of them are wonderful things that go along with the filmmaking, and other things remind me of problems we've had and how we had to solve them. Every film has its problems. You know, there's always people always have great stories from films, so, but there's no main problem. In fact, every time you make a movie, there is some different problem that comes up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very creative business, and the job is to constantly make the film better and better, and that's what everyone is trying to do. And I think when you get to see the selection of props and wardrobe, and you're reminded of how every single department has managed to really bring everything to the table. Every single craftsman on the film has really takes their job seriously in trying to deliver the highest quality possible.
Well, there you have it. 100% of the auction proceeds going to over 45 different charities. And someone now has a new James Bond Aston Martin sat in their driveway. Let's take a look now, a final look at the weather for this evening and the weekend forecast. We might see some outbreaks of rain tonight with temperatures around 14 degrees, but that will clear by the morning with a mix of sunshine and cloud. The rest of Saturday looks bright and settled, but by Sunday, the odd spot of rain will be back with average temperatures around 18 degrees. Thank you for watching London Live News. That's all that we've got time for tonight, but we will be back tomorrow with a roundup of what's happened this week. So join us for London's weekend at 6 a.m. tomorrow. But from me and the rest of the team, have a great weekend.